Commence primary ignition.
I'm just not the hero type, clearly.
What a piece of junk.
Enterprise, this is the captain.
I got a bad feeling about this.
It's all part of the plan.
Engage.
Welcome back to Podcast Super One. I'm your host, Donovan Thompson, with my co-host,
Daniel Wingfield.
and today we're talking Sandman. Yes, we talked Sandman a couple weeks ago, last week. I don't really remember the exact time, but we are back to finish out the last half of Season 1, created by Neil Gaiman. Of course, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. That way you have to on all future episodes of Podcast 2 for 1, as well as all the cool content we have at 2 for 1 Studios. This weekend is D23, so next week's 2 for 1 Joe will be a banger, and we will have tons and tons of things to talk about.
And it's Arkansas Comic Con this weekend, right?
It is Arkansas Comic Con this weekend, which brings me to this. If you didn't know, we are sponsored by Kapow Comics, which will be there at Arkansas Comic Con, located at 4047 East Kill Avenue in Sherwood, Arkansas. There they have comic books, collectibles, graphic novels, and of course special guest appearances throughout the year. Kapow. Daniel, we're here talking The Sandman, part 2 of Season 1. I know that we talked a little bit privately about this back half. If I recall, the first half of this thing you really enjoyed for the most part, right? How are you feeling now that you've watched the whole, I think it's 11 episodes of Season 1?
Yeah, so I think that I love the show as a whole. I do think that the first half of the show is a bit stronger than the second half. I just think, the first half of the show is really almost anthology. It feels like there is some progression, like to him, getting back his tools and his all his cool things. But at the same time, like each of those episodes usually focuses on like a totally different character, whether that's Constantine or is it Satan that he visits in hell?
Lucifer,
or,
yeah.
Yeah, Lucifer, and then the other, I can't think of his name, the man that had the ruby in the restaurant. And I think, the second half, we kind of start focusing on some characters that we keep following. So we have the catalyst, the girl that's the catalyst, or the time vortex. We have the widow that is having dreams about her dead husband, gets pregnant in the dream. I did like Stephen Fry's character, and like some of those, like all the people that were living in that dollhouse kind of thing. And some of that was good. I thought some of those characters and performances weren't incredibly strong, or weren't like, I never believed that the widow was really a widow, right? Like I never felt like she was acting like someone would actually act like if they lost their husband within a year. You know what I mean? Like in terms of how they were trying to set up what the relationship was like, I just never believed her. That she just never seemed like a real widow. The girl that was the time vortex, she was good, if not hit and miss sometimes. But and then the little boy, her little brother, which, he was a cute kid and he had some good moments, but then there were other moments that felt very Disney Channel to me, with his character. And so, every time Morpheus was on screen, the show was pretty much 10 out of 10. I think when we had these long stretches where we weren't with them and we were trying to do this more serialized, at least for, 2 or 3 episodes of story, it just got a little bit more weak. It felt a little bit Doctor Whovian at those points, where in not a complimentary way. In some ways that, like, I love Doctor Who, like Matt Smith run, and even Peter Capaldi's, I think, is amazing. I love it's hokey, right? That show is hokey and kind of corny, but they lean into that, and sometimes that's great, and then sometimes in Doctor Who it's like, okay, we leaned in too hard to the hokey. We just went a little too far, and that, I feel like some of the elements in the story and the characters got a little bit hokey towards the end of the season, but then the final episode was maybe one of my favorite ones, at least, the Night of a Thousand Cats, and I'm not going to say her name right, Calliope. I don't know. Everyone says their name different.
I think it's Calliope, right?
Calliope, okay. Yeah, I thought that was, was kind of a return to the anthology format, which I thought was good. But yeah, a very strong season. I'm very excited for season 2. I kind of hope they lean into more like consistently anthological. But I know there is some sort of an underarching narrative to this whole thing that I'm sure it will build to as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you in the fact that whenever Sandman is on, Morpheus is on screen, like I'm really loving the show. I think he's a pretty phenomenal actor, and just the way they kind of present that character, I think it's just so fun to watch, and it's very engrossing. I personally love the episode. I think we stopped right before the diner episode in the last episode of the podcast. I love the diner episode. It was just so weird and it got dark. And I love that actor. I can't think of his name. He's been in a lot of great stuff. He was, Lucian, I think, in Harry Potter. Yeah. And
did you realize that the girl that is the time vortex? I just need to see what her name is. She was the girl that was dating the chick in the diner that had been just recently broken up with. You remember, like the lesbian girl in the diner who was like couldn't get a hold of this chick that had just dumped her? That was Time Vortex girl.
Oh.
And it's a really quick line, but she mentions they have this thing where like that's the girl that dumped the girl that
interesting.
Was yeah,
interesting. Yeah, I mean so I mean that episode is I think just pretty great, just in terms of like just watching this downward spiral and just downward spiral and seeing just like the worst instincts of humans and just kind of like what we do if we just only have if we only operate on passion and all the kind of the more negative things that I would say, like they're not negative emotions, but they can be sometimes the more selfless or selfish emotions of the other ones. And I thought that was great. I thought the episode of the dollhouse where Death kind of shows Morpheus around and she's taking people's lives, I really like that interaction. I loved, like, it's pretty dark when she goes and gets the baby, and she gets like the sports guy, like all that stuff is, I think, really great, and just kind of shows, again, it shows like the humanity within Morpheus himself, because he sometimes he puts up this facade that he's like, he is like the lord or the overlord of these things, but he really has a soft spot for these people, and it's so fascinating watching him. Like, I think that man, his eyes are teary-eyed the entire show. Like, his eyes are almost always teary-eyed, Morpheus. Like, he's always at that place, it feels like, when he's talking to people. But I agree, when we get into like the time vortex and some of that kind of stuff, and like her going to the house with people, and like the woman who lost her husband and gets pregnant by him, all that just kind of like, I wasn't a huge fan. Also, I'm not a fan in general of like, this show is already magically gobbledygook, so it's gonna be kind of, I'm already kind of against it in that way, just because it's, the rules are just whatever we want them to be in the moment, and I kind of always push back against that. But I've enjoyed the show still, even with that. But when you start having like time vortexes and even things that are like, I don't know, I just also don't like kids. She's a kid to me. Kids with like power that I can't explain. It's just not cool. Like, again, there's that cool factor that I'm not getting. If it was like the Collector or the guy who's the main bad guy, essentially, with like the eyes for the mouth for eyes, if he had got the power, the Corinthian, if he had got it, it seems more interesting because he's sinister and he's got like, I don't know, and he's also a really good actor too, but it has nothing to do with the gender or the sex, whatever, of being the girl, but it's just, she doesn't seem, I don't know, it's just different. I like a more adult kind of conflict, versus, kids just seem like kids.
I agree. And she is a bit of a Mary Sue character. Like, she doesn't have any real struggle other than just trying to understand this crazy power.
Yeah, you're right.
So it definitely feels like she's kind of a perfect character in terms of like personality and character wise. Like, she doesn't need to change to be a better person, kind of thing, which is just boring, I think. And especially when you're coming from this world where like you've been engrossed in these dark episodes with these dark, characters that are like exploring like the reaches of like humans' capacity for cruelty and stuff like that. And then you have this character that is just like perfect in every way, even though she had like this horribly traumatic childhood. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and I think, and then she just starts like trying to then she's just kind of fighting against the forces in the world. I don't know. It's not as interesting because
It's
she doesn't
not.
need to change. She is who she needs to be. And in fact, like at the end of the thing, like she doesn't even do anything. Like Morpheus, I get Morbius, Morpheus.
Morbius. It's
Like
Morpheus.
the resolution is like he just doesn't kill her, and like kind of it was a weird kind of blah resolution to the whole thing for me. It didn't make complete sense.
Her
And I think you're
grandma
right.
takes
Like,
over the power, I believe, right? Like she was supposed to have it,
oh,
but since Dream was
yes,
in prison,
that's right.
so she took
Yes,
it, and then basically Dream killed her, I guess, or absorbed her or whatever. I think, right? And so
I think
a
you're
lot.
right. I think that is yes,
Yeah, and again, I
and that's
think
just
it's
eh,
no, it's more
it's
interesting. Like maybe the guy who, and granted, Neil wrote this 30 years ago, so they're basing off that. But maybe even then, like, so maybe it's more interesting in his writing. I don't know, but he also did the show. But maybe like the guy who's in the diner, who's Harry
yeah,
Potter guy, maybe it's like him that ends up being the time vortex, and that's more interesting because he's got
yeah.
issues, and like Morbius has to like talk to somebody who's not, morally there, and like that's I don't know. It's more interesting,
It
100%.
is. And I think also, like these earlier episodes, like the one you mentioned with death. I mean, like what's so good about that episode to me is like that episode really isn't about any of the things that happen in that episode. That episode is all about the conversation that Death and Morpheus are having with each other, which
Right.
is just like this philosophical discussion of why humans fear death. And like I think that's so cool and so interesting, and like they're not trying to like make a complete statement or like say this or that. They're just kind of shooting the shit about the idea of being you know of our lives being temporary, you know what I mean? Like, and I think that is gold. And like I think you're right, like Morpheus on screen, like he kind of plays this role of this like person that's trying to understand humanity, you know what I mean? And like that is so interesting, I guess. Like to me as someone, and I think that just feels so much more interesting of a conversation, because I think if anyone's really honest with them, we're all just trying to understand our own behavior and we're all just trying to understand like this condition of being human and what to do about it. And I think that is what Morpheus's perspective in this show for most of it is. It's just trying to like, what the fuck are humans doing what they do? You know what I mean? And how can we help? And I think, yeah, then in the latter half, when it's just plot and it's just all about a time vortex, which just turns into a walking MacGuffin Mary Sue girl. It just isn't very interesting. It has a resolution that like just feels kind of like convenient, kind of pulled out of your ass at we'll just give it to this lady that's already dying. Oh, this is easy. Just kind of this like too neat of a bow on it kind of thing. Yeah, and so I agree it's a little weaker, but then I do think that last episode, episode 11, I think was a better note to take a break from the show on, just because it was a return to that, the philosophy. I mean, first of all, to have that first half of the episode animated was just a different choice, an interesting choice, and it had a really interesting kind of stop motion style to the animation.
It did. It kind of reminded me a little of the art style from the comic book.
Oh, okay, interesting.
A kind of a painterly kind of look to it.
Yeah, it had like a watercolor look almost.
Yeah, exactly. And no, I mean that was really cool. I think like that's one of the benefits of having a streaming service versus like broadcast television is that
Yeah.
if this is broadcast television, we all would have knew that there's an episode 11 coming, right? It would have been our TV guides. It would have been blah blah blah.
Right.
They would have promoted it like, hey, next week here's another episode, like whatever. They want those ratings. But when you have a streaming service where that doesn't matter so much, what matters is eyeballs and conversation generation. That's a mouthful. Conversation generation. When you have those, you can drop whatever, whenever, and you don't have to tell a damn soul at all about it. So I think that was really cool to go online and be like, hey, there's a secret episode that just dropped, and you're like, oh, cool. Like, I thought I was done, but I get one more little extra treat. And at first I thought and I heard that it was like, kind of an anthology episode within itself. Like there's a couple stories going on,
Right.
but it was cool seeing the animated part. And then I liked going back to live action and dealing with Morpheus. And and kind of get more of his backstory and his relationships.
Yeah.
And no, I really liked it. I mean, I thought it was a really cool thing, and now you kind of wonder, and they haven't, but have they painted themselves into a position where if they do get a season 2, which they still haven't renewed yet,
Sure.
then will it, will they always have like a secret episode or something like that? I just think it's a cool concept,
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think it's, even just from a marketing perspective, clever. It's just like a way to extend that marketing beat. Everyone's already talking about like, oh, look, 2 weeks after like everyone's kind of stopped talking about it in the zeitgeist, let's throw another episode in there. And it does. I mean, like, obviously we'll see. I wonder if Calliope will be a major character for the rest of the show. I'm not sure. It almost felt like an episode that like it didn't have to be in the season. You know what I mean? Like if it just never came out, you wouldn't really feel like something was missing, right? But like you said, I think I really liked the Muse storyline with the daughter of Zeus, and did like the actor. Shout out to, speaking of Doctor Who, played Rory, longtime Doctor Who companion, was the main writer in the episode. Thought it was done really well, and I think even as a writer or as someone that tries to be creative or find inspiration, I think I enjoyed it just at that base level, that it was kind of about like what truly inspires us, or where does true inspiration come from? Can you force it, or versus like anyway.
No, it's great, and I think that even if this is the last episode, it kind of wraps the show up on a meta level, and I mean, what are ideas but dreams?
There's no way, though. There's just no fucking way this is the last.
I don't know, man.
Someone is going to pick it up. Someone is going to pick it up. Someone will. If
Yeah.
Netflix doesn't, Amazon Prime needs more hit shows. Hulu. Well, I mean, Hulu is a little different because they get shows from like network TV, but like some of these streaming services need like original content. You know what I mean? And this is like A+ quality original content. I mean, like.
Yeah, I mean, it was number 1 in 83 countries for like over 2 weeks, I think.
Yeah, and I think
which is crazy.
It's kind of got its own little universe with all these just vast characters that it can play with. Like it feels like just made for what everyone wants, which is these dynasty franchises. Every streamer wants is like 5 or 6 seasons of every time the show comes on, the world stops and only talks and watches that. And I think Sandman did that, and I think there aren't that many. I mean, like, just in terms of like streaming shows that have done that well, there aren't that many. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like each streaming service has maybe 1 or 2, but like other than that, they're mostly hit and miss. And I think
they are, and there's a lot of them.
And this one is just, this one compared. I mean, like, this compares with Game of Thrones for me. Like, it's different, but like in terms of like the thought and the amount of time and budget and costumes and the world, like this competes with those kind of giant like universe building franchises. And I just think that someone is not going to pass on that. Someone.
I don't think so either. I'm very curious to see what they do with it. I mean, again, we've heard it costs a lot of money, but these first 8 episodes of Lord of the Rings cost $500 million. That's a lot of money for a TV show. And and I will say this: I've been kind of not bummed out, but like I've been really reflecting on this year's movie releases and that kind of stuff, and just being like, man, there's just, even though there's things I really like I love Top Gun Maverick, and I really like the Batman, as we've talked about a lot on the show and on 2 for 1 Joe and everything else. No, it was March. It was this year. Batman was. Isn't that wild? Yeah.
That doesn't feel real.
I know. It feels like last year. It does. But there hasn't been, I don't know, it's just been to me a little overall lower quality year for movies, and it was supposed to be like a bigger year, because this is like, to me, like the first big post-pandemic year. Like, this is kind of like we're somewhat back to normal, right? I feel like it feels back to normal here in Arkansas anyway. And I mean, I was in California, and it felt over the weekend, and it felt pretty normal there. I mean, there was not much different than when I was there 3-4 years ago at all. Actually, I don't know the difference. But after Sandman come out, I'm caught up on House of Dragon. I'm caught up on She-Hulk. I'm caught up on on Lord of the Rings, and I actually just watched the whole trilogy of the last 2 days. Actually, because
Extended edition or theatrical
I watched
cuts?
the regular. I watched the extended edition last Thanksgiving, and I think I prefer the regular editions.
There's a reason that those scenes were cut. Like I, as a Tolkien fan, as someone that like just savors getting to like be in that world while watching those movies, I love the extended editions. As like a movie fan, as someone that wants a story with good pacing and good like arc lengths and like stuff like that, the theatrical cuts are better. Just that they just flow better as movies. You know what I mean? When I watch the extended editions, it's hard to sit through an entire one of them because just so many more little scenes are added in where just like acts are extended past kind of their interest or past kind of like where the momentum is. And so, yeah, I think the theatrical cuts are just pretty like I usually am a fan of director's cuts, like things that puts it all in there. I think a lot of times those are better movies. In fact, I've been seeing some buzz about the new Spider-Man release that apparently has some really fun stuff in like those new 11 minutes or whatever.
It is called the More Fun Stuff edition.
Is it really?
Yeah, that's what it's called.
That's really hilarious. I didn't know
fun.
that. Maybe I did.
I've kind of heard the opposite, actually. I mean, I've heard if you're a fan, then you're going to enjoy it, but I've kind of
heard exactly. Like that. Like if you all you want is just more of the three Spider-Man doing shit together on screen, was for you. You know.
Yeah,
kind of
I hear it's kind of less that and more other stuff.
Oh, okay. Well, all that to say is like I love
sorry.
director's cuts. Yeah, original trilogy, Lord of the Rings, like the theatrical cuts. There's a reason those movies won so many Oscars. You know what I mean? I know a lot of them were for set design and production design and graphics, but like they work so well as films. I think like just the flow, the pacing. I mean, like the first Fellowship of the Ring starts out with like 15 minutes of voiceover or something like that, and yet it still works really, really well.
Yeah, no, I mean, like not to turn this to Lord of the Rings, but I watched those first 2 episodes and I was kind of like, I want to go, and we'll say this again when we talk about Lord of the Rings, but I wanted to go and I just kind of wanted to get more in the world. And like, I was a fan growing up, and I hadn't watched them starting college. I watched them before 2012 until last Thanksgiving. And like, you talked about them a lot during school, and I was like, I'm going to watch them. And when I watched them during Thanksgiving, I was kind of like, yeah, these are so good and stuff, but like, it still wasn't that Star Wars or Marvel thing for me like it is for you or someone. Yeah. But, and then just watching them the last 2 days, I'm like, I'm coming away better from it. I think because I watched the versions I watched as a kid, and also they feel obviously a little quicker, because I can kind of go through them faster and maybe
get to more of the fun action sequences a lot quicker.
Yeah. And so I enjoyed it more, and like I'm a fan, of course, but I'm very curious to what you think about the show. And
I've only seen the first episode so far, and just as a super non-spoiler version, I mean, I'm on board. Like I don't think it's perfect, and I think the first episode, like I feel like I was introduced to 50 characters and like 40 different locations, and I'm just like, I can't keep up with them all. I wish they would have maybe taken like. Could we have introduced some of them like in episode 2? Maybe just like 2 or 3. I don't know. But I think that it's gorgeous. I think the acting is really good. I think so far like the performances are good. I think most of the writing is pretty close to like what you would like what you got out of like Tolkien. Like it's not Tolkien, and I think sometimes that I feel that. But I think at the same time it's pretty close, and I feel like they're really trying to mirror that or like homage that, and so I mean like it's all going to depend on just how well they tell the story. I mean like they've got good actors, interesting plot, interesting worlds. Seems like just good kind of script, like dialogue writing, like the dialogue's written well. But then it all hangs on like, what is this story? How does it play out? How do we feel about these characters through the journey and after the journey?
100%.
I think they've started well. So I'm
really happy that you said all that, because I think you're the only person I've seen period say those words. Because
it's a thing where like
online is pretty vitriol. Like everyone literally dogs that they say they hate the dialogue. Obviously, there's a big debate on like there being elves that are of color. There's women dwarves that have no beards. Stuff like this. That's really a hot debate right now. And that's the thing is I don't have a huge connection to it, so I don't really care as much. But also the thing is, from what I understand, like Amazon only had the rights to the trilogy movies, and they also only had the rights to the Silmarillion, which was only 20 pages of like the Second Age in there.
They don't have the rights to Silmarillion.
Oh, sorry. There's 20 pages of, but even in the Silmarillion, there's not much about the Second Age in there. But in the Return of the King, there's like a 20 pages in the appendices about the Second Age. They had the rights to that. But I guess from what I understand, I talked to someone who I think we're gonna have on the pod to talk with us, who's a Lord of the Rings aficionado. I guess the Garrett Tuggle. I'm hoping he'll be on there. He'll put us in our place for sure. But from a Tolkien perspective, but I think I guess that Christopher published 8 to 10 different novels expanding the lore, or just based on notes that Tolkien had done. And I kind of said to Christopher, I said, well, or not Christopher, I said to Garrett, kind of jokingly, kind of not. I said, isn't that fan fiction? Because Tolkien never published it. Like it's not published. Some things are not published for a reason, and I don't know. It's kind. I kind of look at like Star Wars. Like I love the Mandalorian. I love pieces of Obi-Wan. I love parts kind of that, and there's pieces I like of the sequel trilogy, but it's almost all fan fiction without George. Like it's like it's if George isn't touching it, it's fan fiction in my opinion. So I feel like these people who are making the show are putting a lot of care into it, and like they're not. I mean, they are doing it obviously for the base reasons of money and franchising and all that kind of stuff. But also, like, if someone was going to do it, I'm glad that they're doing it at this level because it's the best looking show I've ever seen in my life, hands down. The best looking show.
The CGI is crazy good. The green screen work is phenomenal. It's like I can't tell the difference between a real backdrop and a CGI one, other than just knowing that CGI backdrop can't exist in reality. But going to the kind of the zeitgeist, the discussion about it, like I think for part of this is just like everyone wants to be outraged about something because it can feel cathartic to be mad and rageful. And I just think like when I look at like Peter Jackson's original trilogy, why were those movies so good? Yes, it did stay true to a lot of what Tolkien wrote, but not in terms of specifics as much as like the heart of what that journey was about, which was about these deep friendships and these deep relationships fighting against what seems like insurmountable odds. He came up with a lot of ideas for Lord of the Rings while being in World War II, I believe, or was it World War One? I can't remember. And so the idea of Mordor and like this great evil that is like just seems to be mounting on all sides, and we've got to band together and find some sort of strength in our differences and find a way to overcome it, right? Like that's also the story of like World War II and World War One. You know what I mean? Like as much as that's like the general story of what the Lord of the Rings is about. And I think that is what the Peter Jackson movies did so fucking well. And yes, they spent so much time. Like if you've watched the behind the scenes for that, like everything in that movie was everything was practical. They built an actual like Rohan like city that's still there. Like, you know what I mean? They built Hobbiton in the ground and still there. Like that Peter Jackson put like 4 years of pre-production into those movies before they were even greenlit. You know what I mean? Like that is the care and the attention that he brought to this world, was that it was about trying to portray a world on screen that feels consistent and realistic to itself, right? To the world it's playing in, and then telling a story that is true to the heart of what those Tolkien books were about, which is I think that the heart of that story, the heart of like coming together despite our differences to face off this great evil, is a reason those books like resonate with so many people, because that's just a really encouraging and hopeful story. You know what I mean? Even in the face of all this darkness and evil in this world. And I think for me, it's like, I don't give a fuck if Tolkien had dwarves with beards on them, and they don't want to do that in the show. I don't give a shit as long as you tell me a good story with good characters that feels like it is in line. I know that because part of this they're just making it up. That feels like this is in line with the kind of ideas and virtues that Tolkien was trying to disseminate in his, like, thematically in his work, right? Like, I'm more concerned of, have you carried the themes and the heart of the material into this new version rather than does it look verbatim how he wrote it in the book? Because I think, for one, books and movies aren't the same thing. And I mean, there's Peter Jackson changed things about the original trilogy that weren't that way in the books, and some of it was for the better. You know what I mean? Like when Frodo turns Sam away, when he makes him leave, he banishes him, like in the third movie. And he's like, "You're not going to be with us anymore." That doesn't happen in the books. It doesn't. But you know what? That change makes, when Sam decides to say, "Fuck it, I don't care if he asks me to leave. I know I'm not going to leave my friend behind." That makes it's a really great moment. And it's, in terms of like Sam's arc in these movies, it is critical. I mean, it's like the climax of his arc, right? In so many ways. And like, that wasn't in the books like that. You know what I mean? And like, I don't give a fuck. It worked, and it worked really well. I love the books. I've read them so many times, and I love the movies. I've loved them so many times, watched them so many times. They're different things that luckily have some similar themes and like heart of the story. But you can't convert a book to a movie and just expect it to be the same thing. If we've changed mediums, we've gone from written word to moving pictures, there's necessary change to make that work, you know? And I'm just like, I just don't have enough energy to be up in arms about dwarves without beards or people of color in roles that maybe Tolkien didn't write them in at that point in time. Like, I don't care. If it's a good story and good characters, give me more. You know, they're obviously putting the time and energy into it. It's got the budget. They're doing it right at those levels. So,
no, I agree with everything you said, and that's kind of where I'm at with it too. You know, I'm enjoying it so far, and I think my issue with Lord of the Rings in general is kind of something we talked about a second ago with Sandman, was that it's sometimes there's a little gatekeeping in terms of like there's a lot of lore, and it's like, you know, it is detailed in some of these places in the books or whatever,
sure.
But sometimes it's a little, you know, it's just a little, I don't understand it all, and I have to kind of go do some extra reading to kind of get it. And that's partly that's kind of the fun, is doing the research and finding out things like that. But I mean, I'm really interested about how this show turns out, and I'm looking forward to us talking about it on the pod. And I'm glad we got a little taste of it here on the Sandman episode. And to kind of tie back, I was thinking about these movies that weren't that great this year, like that I was hoping they would be. And I was like, man, you know, we got House of the Dragon, which I'm really liking a lot, and we've got Lord of the Rings, and we've gotten Sandman and Stranger Things season 4, all within the last like 2 months.
You're right. And
a lot of
we got
content.
Moon Knight this year was good.
I was just saying, we've got plenty more than what I just listed, but a lot of
you're right. At a streaming level, this feels better than we've had in a long time.
This year's good year. Better Call Saul.
Good year.
I mean, you know,
exactly. I mean, like, I'm behind on that, but the last season is out this year, and that's not streaming. That's on TV. Sure.
No, sure.
But and technically Game of Thrones is too, but most people stream it.
But I guess I should say, I mean, so we're still talking TV versus movies. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think you're right that this year is really strong from a streaming point of view. And I think, you know, like, are we still potentially getting an Invincible season this year? Maybe late in the year?
I still don't know, honestly. Like, I
thought that would be coming out soon.
I feel like we would have heard about it. It had been out this time last year already, but we haven't heard a actual release date. But we had The Boys this year, which I know you were a little lukewarm on, but you know,
but still, like, all these streaming services putting out just like a lot of their A-listers in their lineups are like out. Like Game of Thrones is like HBO's, you know, big hitter. You know what I mean? Stranger Things is Netflix's big hitter. Lord of the Rings is now Amazon's big hitter. I mean, like, you don't spend $500 million and it not be your thing, you know?
Yeah, it better be your thing. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've seen some things that like it'd be like if this truly flops, like Amazon could be in trouble. It's like Prime, like it would be a big blow to their business.
Yeah, I heard that it like if it flopped, then their streaming service they could shelve their streaming services because like it's not worth it. Like if they put this much time and energy into it, then like what else? I mean, what other franchises are there that haven't been existed yet? Like or that being created like Marvel, Star Wars, all these are already like
You're
Lord of the
right.
Rings is kind of one of the last like big ones. It's like I mean Harry Potter. I mean like
It hasn't
Lord of the
been
Rings is
franchised
huge.
to the
Yeah, it's
craziness.
huge. Yeah.
You know, I'll be honest, I'm scared of that. I worry that we're gonna get a Gandalf origin story movie and an Aragorn one, and then they're just gonna start not being as good. But yeah, I mean, I think you're right that Lord of the Rings is kind of this like one of the last like well-known IPs that isn't MCU'd yet.
Well, it's funny because Travis just texted us, and I did see this like right before we started the pod. Travis just texted us and said he loves that how the all the Adobe startup images are are Rings of Power, and they are because I was turning on Photoshop before we started, and it was Galadriel, and I was like, "What the fuck?" And I was like, "Man, they're really marketing this thing."
They are.
I didn't know
marketing.
I didn't know that was an option that they could get the startup images for fucking Adobe Premiere. You know, it's just kind of wild.
I don't know. That's interesting.
It's super interesting.
Yeah.
But no, Daniel, how can our listeners write into us?
Listeners, you can write into bit.ly/241mail. That's bit.ly/241mail. Let us know what you thought of The Sandman. Did you think it was as good as everyone else did? What were your thoughts on the second half of the season? The special little surprise episode at the end? Yeah, write into us, bit.ly/241mail.
And of course, if you can't hit our bit.ly, you can always hit us in the comment section below. youtube.com/2for1studios, the best place to consume the content. Of course, we have 2for1 Joe there, which I believe I'm going to announce it right here, right now. Next week is our last episode for a while. Next week will be 30 episodes for the year. It's our season finale, so to speak, and we may start back up sometime next year, but we'll see. But we're going out with a banger, I believe. Also, don't quote me, Joe Williams might return for us, and we will be talking D23 and all the cool announcements. We're expecting a Fantastic Four cast announcement, and there's a lot of other names being thrown out there.
Scintillating rumors about that. Very interesting stuff.
Yeah, there's a lot of things going on. Oh, sorry.
It's okay.
I'm so sorry. So sorry. I don't know what I did.
Maybe just wrap it. Let's just wrap the episode.
I don't know what I did. That's what happens when I start trying to plug another show.
Yeah.
I hit a button and then I messed it up. Anyway, my name is Donovan Thompson.
I'm Daniel Wingfield.
And we have spoken.